Listen to this. It's beautiful, isn't it? Which reminds me, colonization was one of the worst things that happened to the indigenous cultures here in the Americas, not just because land was stolen, disease spread, and wiped out entire populations, but because entire ways of thinking were erased. You had languages that disappeared, ceremonies that were outlawed, spiritual practices that became labeled as evil, and generations of people who were taught to disconnect from their traditions, their ancestors, and even themselves. Yes, tell them. Many were forced to abandon their beliefs rooted in nature, community, and spiritual balance, and replace them with a system that taught them to search for the divine outside themselves. But what I find interesting is that many of the indigenous cultures across the Americas used sacred plant medicine long before modern governments existed. And these weren't always viewed as substances to escape reality, but tools used in ceremonies, self-healing, reflection, and spiritual connection. From peyote ceremonies to mushroom rituals in Mesoamerica, say that 3 times fast, many of these traditions were deeply tied to community, nature, and the exploration of consciousness. Even ancient art points towards humanity's long relationship with altered states of consciousness. You had the Tassili cave paintings in Africa, the mushroom stones found in Guatemala. The Nahua referred to mushrooms as Tiananakato, meaning flesh of the gods. It's also interesting how many of these substances associated with introspection, ego dissolution, and spiritual awakening became heavily criminalized. Now, don't get me wrong, these experiences are not for everybody. Some people do have difficult experiences. Some confront emotions from part of themselves they've been avoiding for years. But maybe that confrontation is part of the experience itself, because you can't help but notice literally how many people describe the same reactions: interconnectedness, a deeper appreciation for life, nature, and less attachment to the ego, and more empathy for presence. It's almost like certain experiences temporarily interrupt the illusion of separation. And maybe that's what makes conversation about consciousness so uncomfortable to the system that was built on control. Because once people begin questioning who they are beyond status, fear, and division, and constant consumption, the illusion starts cracking. When people begin thinking for themselves, they reconnect with community, nature, ancestry, and something deeper within themselves. That's why there's always been a war on consciousness, because consciousness helps people remember where they came from. It reminds them that the divine may have never been as distant as they were taught. And when people remember their own power, a system that was built on fear begins losing its power.